In today's episode of the Hunter Valley PaleoZoo, we'll build a dynamic, sunken, mixed-species enclosure for the Corythosaurus and the Lokiceratops, continuing the Montana Trail with a fresh take on the first enclosure Jurassic World Evolution 3's campaign makes the player build, which quite fittingly occurs on the Montana Badline side. My name is Hooposaurus, and as always, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and welcome back to the channel. If you've seen my last couple community posts, you'll know that this enclosure, whilst beautiful, was an absolute nightmare to build, but it also won in a landslide in the poll to see which dinosaur should be added next. So let's not waste any more time and get right into the build. As always, I've gone ahead and planned out the entire enclosure using our terrain paints and invisible fences to get an idea of scale for the enclosure, as well as using those gravel pieces there to lay out the location for the bridge, which will cross from both sides of the habitat to allow easy guest movement. After that, I've gone ahead and used the flattened terrain tool to create these nice sheer cliffs around the enclosure so that the dinosaurs won't be able to get out, and to make adding the rock wall that we'll do later easy, as well as using some of the terrain foliage brushes just to check the dinosaurs can get from both sides of the enclosure. Now moving on to that rock wall I just mentioned, I decided to go and do something a little bit different with this enclosure and use a technique I've been meaning to try out, which is using the aquatic thermal vent rock pieces and their underside as a different kind of smoother rock texture, reminiscent of the cladding pieces in Planet Zoo, which I've been so dearly missing. And I think it turned out really great when mixed in with a few of those smaller temperate rock pieces, which I used just to create this one piece, which I'll then, as we're doing here, move all the way across the entire enclosure, making sure to move it up and down and in different angles just to make it not look flat and monotonous. And then, as you'll see later, I'll go ahead and remove a bunch of other excess rocks and rotate some of those ones around so that you just to completely remove the repeating textures, because one of the quickest ways to make a build feel artificial and like it's been built by the player is to have repeating textures in foliage and rock walls and stuff like this. You see it all the time in game design. It's very obvious when you see a cliff that's got repeating rock textures and it just breaks immersion. So the same thing applies here, which is why even then we had that little ledge, just to again hide those repeating textures. You can see over here we dig out a bit more of that cliff, make it sure it's straighter, because the path kind of interferes with that. I end up removing it and just doing it again because it's not working. But again, we see over here we make another little ledge going up and down and all kinds of different heights there. Before, like I said, we just remove that cliff path entirely to make the cliff nice and flat, which just makes the rock wall fit in there easier. So over here I make this all one group because I decide when I'm bored of placing down the rocks, I don't want to do what I was saying before and just move them around, make sure the top of the ledge that goes around the rock wall looks flat, as well as, like I said, removing a bunch of those extra rocks, rotating them around, and it just makes it look more natural, removes the fact, makes it less obvious that we've just repeated that one group all across. Over here I now go ahead and add some of the dirt, soil pieces in the gap, just because the terrain can't get in close enough to not have a gap there, so it's just easy to replace that using the soil pieces, and we'll cover that all up with foliage, and you can barely even notice in the end. And then we're back to doing some rocks. So again, I take those, just over here checking the height that they can get over. Still use some water and foliage there to make sure that they to encourage them to move from side to side. And then, yeah, we go ahead and just move all those rocks around onto this side. Again, just checking to see how the dinosaurs are moving in the enclosure. And just going all the way around back over to this side. A little bit of a ledge over there. And you'll see we do leave a gap just about over here. And we will leave that gap for a backstage shelter and implied realism area for backstage holding to separate the species if needed or something. And we'll do that towards the end, but I do leave that little gap in the rock wall there. And again, now on this side, do the same thing. Remove a bunch of the obviously repeating rocks, rotate some around, place in extra rocks in some cases, and you can just see the difference as I do it. It becomes far less monotonous and just really achieves that desired effect. So again, we take some of the tree cages from the Ornithomimus enclosure. Obviously, these guys would eat, strip off bark off trees. Without those tree cages, realistically, nothing would be able to grow in this enclosure apart from a few weeds. So I do try to stick to a realistic foliage vibe in this enclosure. So yeah, going for mainly dirt and mud with a bit of sand terrain paint. and just only having trees when they're in the tree cages to give them a bit of protection and let them grow. Again, walking around, as always, make sure everything's still looking in scale, looking good. Do the dinosaurs feel like they have enough space? These are all very important questions to continuously ask yourself while moving around. So over here I work on this little vista as you just come out of the Deinonychus enclosure that we built last time, just adding a little bit of that low fence to create and planning out a little sight line there for guests to get a tease of this enclosure as they're going through. Yeah, then I just made it a little bit deeper because the Corythosaurus' head crests were kind of clipping through the gravel, so just make it a little bit lower so they have no issues there, and use some rocks to line out that terrain elevation shift, which is always an effective technique. Again, just place a few more of our little ledges, checking everything's looking good before we move on to building the bridge. So we use our circular wooden posts, and I change those to be a more pale grey colour, and we just place those up and down. Check that the dinosaurs can get through with collision, because for some reason one of the many glitches I was facing here is that objects in this enclosure just revert back to their initial collision state whenever I reload the game. They don't do that anywhere else in the save or any other saves. If anyone knows how to fix that, please let me know, because it's driving me insane. If I can't fix that, you'll see later we'll do a concrete lining around the pond, and if I can't fix that, it's going to really hinder some other enclosure designs I have planned. But yes, so if you know a fix to that, please let me know. And if you also know a fix to stop the game from crashing every time I load in with dinosaurs in the enclosure, that would also be great. If you've experienced that and you've found a fix, please let me know. Otherwise, it's just going to have to stay empty, which sucks, but it is what it is. I'll make sure there's dinosaurs in here when I do tillers and stuff. But moving back onto the bridge, you can see over there I decided to change the angle of that roof. And we do go for a metal cladding roof, but I decided to make it a bit more of a reddish, earthier colour, because I felt that fit with the North American theme a bit more. I play around here with an angled roof, but it just wasn't looking right underneath, so I just scrapped that. I did want to go a bit heavier on the theming for this enclosure and just really give it that classic North American look. We don't have very many North American animals in zoos in Australia at all. Like at most you'll find an alligator if you're lucky, or a American bison in a open plains style zoo. So I imagine something like this would have that very kind of classical, not classic, but stereotypical kind of like woodland theming, similar to how you'd see Australian theming in American zoos. And yeah, you can see here we just had a few logs underneath to support that gravel. There's probably also a piece of concrete there or something, but yeah, we don't need to build that because it's not seen. And then building a railing over here with some more logs and mesh. The inspiration for this habitat actually didn't come from any particular real zoo. Rather, it came from a Planet Zoo build I did a while ago for American bison and wapiti, the wapiti being a modded creature. But regardless, that was a really fun build. I really liked it. It was the best kind of similar situation. Again, it had the sunken thing with the bridge. There'll be an image of that enclosure up on screen now. You can see where it came from. But yeah, I thought that'd be a really fun one to replicate in Jurassic World Evolution to, you know, see how you can like mimic builds across Frontiers games. And also it's just a really nice one. So yeah, that's why I did that. But yeah, as you can see over here, I decided to do a custom flooring for this path over here, using originally the concrete pieces, but they just felt too smooth and like, I don't know, they just didn't feel right. So we swapped them out for the plaster, which just has a bit more texture to it and felt a lot nicer to look at. I don't know why, but the concrete just wasn't vibing with me. So I moved to the plaster, again using that kind of like beigey colour as before, but it looks really nice, very happy with it. So we moved that all the way around on the path, around on that curve there, and then I do actually play around with, after we place that down over there, I play around with changing it to potentially to a red colour, similar to the herringbone, but it did not look right at all, so we switched that probably right back to the beige and connect it all up there. Eventually we'll put in a little planter. I think I mentioned that earlier. I did now. And we put that around there and add some more plants and stuff, and it looks really nice. But firstly, before we get, that's a while away, what I'm building over here is a little elevated viewing stand. I play around with adding some wheelchair access to it, but the fences were way too big, so that ends up getting cut. Apologies to people in wheelchairs, or who have broken legs. You're not going to be able to use this viewing stand, sorry, but there's plenty of other viewing areas for that. If it was the only way to view this enclosure, I would, like for realism's sake, I would put in more emphasis on adding a wheelchair ramp there, or just a ramp for not even wheelchairs, but pushers, all kinds of people that just don't like stairs. But it didn't fit, and it didn't feel that important considering the rest of the enclosure is accessible. So yeah, we go ahead and do that. We play around with the colours. Eventually I decide to copy the wood colour to the floor, but keep the default colour for the posts, and go ahead and add a undercover part to this shelter, because it just felt like it was needing a little bit more. So again, we copy over those, that corrugated metal from the bridge in the same colour, and move that across and just add in a few more of those little support beams there, and add some underneath on both sides, and it looks, I'm really happy with how this came out. Provides a nice, much cleaner viewing into the dinosaurs habitat, because you don't have to worry about as much overlook blind spot. But over here I am adding some lovely signs, zoo realistic signs I found in the workshop from Dino Rules, I believe his name is. He left a lovely comment on the last episode about his prop animals, so definitely check that out, him out. But I ended up, while looking at his page, finding these signs, and I was like, oh my god, these are gorgeous. So I just had to put them in here, and they looked really good. So awesome job, dude, if you're watching this. They're absolutely great. I'll definitely be putting these across the whole zoo, because why should I make them myself when yours are right there? So yeah, we then are moving on and doing a bunch of dirt and foliage. I kind of just cut around that because you don't need to see me doing 10 minutes of placing Russian fischl bushes and dirt. But while that's happening, something I do want to talk about is the wetlands species pack that got revealed on the day that I'm recording this. Should be just the day after for when you guys are seeing it, but the irritator looks absolutely gorgeous. Dinosaurs probably coming in the free, well, most definitely coming in the free update, and 2 other mystery species. Dinosaurs will definitely be in this park. I've already made plans for that ever since that kind of announcement came out, so made plans for that. Irritator is a bit more questionable. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. It's just a matter of, can I find a place to put it? It is the right size and scale for this park, so I'll see what I can do. And if there is a big croc in this pack, which I reckon there will be, it's been called the Wetlands Species Pack by the person that leaked the irritator. Not the Wetlands Dinosaur Pack. I know some of the other bigger YouTubers have called it the Wetlands Dinosaur Pack since, but I don't know. If it is the Species Pack, then that would definitely imply that something is not a dinosaur. Hopefully a big croc. If there is a big croc, I have big plans for that, and that would be awesome. But it would require me to be able to use concrete in water and then still use it. But yeah, so hopefully I can get the collision to work by then. That's, again, all assuming there is a big croc, and I have no idea what the other species is going to be. Probably Ostroraptor based on the JW2 files, and if that is the case, again, it's a more iffy like the irritator, especially since we have Deinonychus, which is another feathered dromaeosaur. I kind of want to stick to only one kind of silhouette, like body-shaped silhouette in this park, so like not having 2 ceratopsians or 2 ankylosaurs. Well, 2 big ceratopsians. We'll have Protoceratops and Psittacosaurus in this park, but they're far different from Lokiceratops in body shape, so I don't really count that. But putting that aside, we're coming up to the moment in this build that caused me the most grief, the first crash. And I've left this in just so you can kind of see what I mean. But you see, it freezes, I save, I'm like, what the hell happened? And it crashed. And that would continue to crash for ages until I just decided, just remove the dinosaurs. Remove the dinosaurs. And yeah. So I think from this point out, there's no dinosaurs, or there's another cart where it crashed again. I can't quite remember. But yeah, so I had to rebuild like pretty much everything in the last 10 minutes that you just saw me make. Luckily, I was able to get enough time in the save before it crashed to make a blueprint of some of the scenery, so I could just copy that over, which is why the viewing gallery there is exactly the same. I was able to get that as a blueprint, which was amazing. But yeah, I then just went ahead and did a bunch more of that fencing around the whole enclosure, soil, plant placing, all of that jazz, because you don't need to see me do that twice. You don't really need to see me do it once, to be honest. But yeah, so I went ahead and did that all off camera, and yeah, that was a pain, and it continued to be more difficult, like after while trying to record the cinematics. Actually, that was an absolute pain. I could not stay in the save for like more than 2 minutes. It was dreadful. But yeah, we got there in the end. So as you can see over there, I just put some drains by the gravel, just for a bit of more implied realism there, and a nice little divider in the path types. And we work on just adding an end to that laster path over here on the other side of the bridge, with again those drains to connect it back to the herringbone. And then moving some more of those little mesh fences that we made in the Nodosaurus enclosure, all across there. Some lovely Russian thistle bushes, tree ferns, saplings, thyme bushes, the whole shebang. My foliage palette for this park, with the inclusion of cypress trees, which will only be for this habitat, really, but that's okay. They kind of fit the theming. I don't want to include them anywhere else. So you can see there, I made a little, I just removed a bit extra foliage there to make room for where the stagey Moloch backstage will go when we get onto that. As I'm sure my subscribers will know, if you voted on the community post to choose the order of these habitats, Dilophosaurus came in second, so that will be next episode, and then after that will be the Stegi Moloch. I'm not going to pull a Minecraft mob vote and promise the Stegi Moloch and Dilophosaurus and then never deliver on it. I've already started working on the Dilophosaurus enclosure, so I can say that. But yeah, so over here now we're just working on we just worked on the basic foliage inside the habitat. Very simple, very minimalistic, what could realistically survive, before I move on to adding a concrete surrounding to this pool, which I've alluded to many times so far. As I do that, I just use plaster pieces from the bottom to create a base level, and then I used align to surface and rotating it 90 degrees to get a nice gentle slope that aligned with the majority of the terrain. And then I just duplicate that all the way around to create that nice shape over there. And then we go ahead and use eventually end up deciding on the, not on rocks, but on the plaster columns, just again to keep that nice coherent look. And we just make those white and duplicate those all around. And I don't know if I do it on camera, I definitely don't do it right now, but I add a drain at the bottom of that pool. I decided to do this because realistically, these dinosaurs would be doing a lot of stuff in that pool.
That is one big pile of shit.
Yeah. So the keepers would want to have an easy way to clean that. So concrete is great for cleaning, dirt is not. So that's why that pool would be realistically fully concreted over. I won't do that for all the enclosures, but for this one it just felt appropriate. And then I decided to add in some dead trees, that rock, which ended up being deleted off camera because I thought it was causing the lag. It wasn't. The crushes, sorry. And again, another thing that was in the enclosure I add later are these lovely rock piles, which I've again found in the workshop. I'll credit the person. I'm actually pulling them up right now. We can make these beautiful rock piles over here. They're really great for this enclosure. I thought they were causing the crashing at one point. It was like, maybe it's like all the duplicated pieces underneath the ground. And then it worked for about an hour after deleting that. I was like, yay! And then I re-logged back in and it still worked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I logged back in 2 hours later and it crashed immediately. So yeah, I really don't know what the hell is going on in this enclosure. But yeah, so I guess we're gonna have to stay empty. It's like the only way. But as I mentioned at the beginning, we left that space for the backstage, and that's what we are working on now. So instead of doing the rock wall, I decided to do a nice concrete wall for this area that felt kind of realistic. This is like an extension of the hole, I guess you could say. Maybe that the rest of it was natural, but here they've dug it out even more just to create an easy backstage area. So we've got a nice concrete wall there. And you can see we had some plaster around it for like the foundation. And that other building over there I've planned out will be their backstage shelter. Purely illusion. No interior for that one. Not at all, actually. I think I even leave some terrain in there. Just because you cannot see into it at all. And you'll see what I mean. And there's no point wasting time on that. Especially when this enclosure is so temperamental as it is. So yeah, I just put in a nice gate there, which is from the entrance to the backstage by the playground, a Notosaurus enclosure, so I just copied that over. And then use some fences there to create the backstage area for the Corythosaurus and Lokiceratops before we work on the actual building over here. So again, I go for a very similar vibe to the other backstage buildings we've done, just because this enclosure feels the most removed from the others, and it's one of the architectural features of the backstage. To one, not only represent the reference image, which is kind of the inspiration for the other backstage enclosures, as well as the real life backstage that was based off of, which is the Taronga Zoo Giraffe House. But yeah, so we used the wooden pillars there to create that nice cladding over the panel piece, which looks lovely, before we start working on using some girders over here to create a nice little area around underneath the roof. You can sort of see there. And then to create the roof, I copy over one of the panels from the Compy Bistro, and then you'll see we recolor them to be like a nice brown shade. So I guess pretend it's wood, or it can just be brown corrugated iron. I'm actually not sure whether or not I prefer to imagine it's wood or just iron. I think I like to pretend it's actually, no, yeah, just keep it as corrugated iron. I think that works law-wise. And there you go, just creating them on the spot. And then we add our bins, as you can expect. We would need a lot of bins to pick up the aforementioned.
That is one big pile of shit.
There I go ahead and just finish up this area for now. We do come back to it for some facility dressings before using our soil pieces again, just to fill in this big old gap here behind the backstage. You put a gradient there to make it smoothen out nicely into the actual terrain. And then we finish up with that there before going ahead and coming back to our backstage with using some concrete pieces to start building a staff walkway around the edge. And here I start working on making a little like gantry-way staircase down for staff to use. Realistically, there should also probably be an elevator here. I'll probably do that off camera if I feel daring enough to risk the safety of my entire safe file. So yeah, just make a nice little shape there using the gantry and the staircases there, as well as adding on some of the railing, which I play around with different colours, but I just settle on the default yellow. I think it works. It's nice high vis, which is really important at night. And you can see there we check the scale before starting to move our railing across the edge and bringing it down the stairs over here. So yeah, we just continue that all the way around, making sure there's no place that anyone could fall off, as well as again using those yellow fence poles from the same set to create some nice beams to support our gantryway. I don't know if this is structurally sound in the slightest, but it looks good, and that's good enough for me. So yeah, we then add in some other railing underneath here, just to connect that up to the staircase, and I think that turned out really nice. Again, I just decided to add another little bit of railing there, before continuing our railing all the way around the edge, to make sure that nobody falls in. I'll just do that edge for now for some reason. And then I add in some floodlights before then continuing on to do the rest of the ledge. And just bring that all the way across on that side, and then doing it all the way across over here. Yeah, just making sure there's no places for anyone to fall in. because that would be bad. We don't want that. And you can also see there that the terrain, for some reason, decided to bug itself and just poke through the fucking terrains. Which sucks. But yeah, we just get over that. I think it appears in the cinematics, so if you spot that, good job. I think if I remember correctly, it's very obvious, actually. But yeah, it just does that every time I load in. This enclosure really hates me, but it turned out really nice, so I'm not going to redo it. But yeah, the speed build's just coming around to an end now. I just add in some concrete, finish up the backstage. A lot of it happens off camera because it's very repetitive. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like, a subscribe if you found it inspirational, or just love the content in any way, shape, or form. It means so much to me. So just sit back, relax, enjoy the rest of the build and the cinematics, and until next time, bye-bye.